Welcome everyone to today's lecture on global governance and international organizations by Mr. Daren Tang. Mr. Tang is the Director General of the World Intellectual Property Organization, where he took up the post in October of last year. Before his appointment as Wipo Director General, he served as the Chief Executive of the Intellectual Property Office of Singapore. Between 1997 and 2012, before joining IPOS, Mr. Tang held different legal positions within the Attorney General's Chambers and the Ministry of Trade and Industry of Singapore. The moderator for today's session is Dr. Aurel Nilufer, Director for NUS Center for International Law. Without further delay, we will now begin the lecture.
Thank you. I'm going to first start off, if I may, by welcoming our participants and everyone joining us from Facebook. And I can't say on behalf of Patricia and myself what an honor it is to have Director General Daren Tang take time from his very busy schedule as the head of a major UN organization and be with us today. I also want to add that Director Tang is an historic figure for Singapore as the first Singaporean to be head of a UN organization. So it's a great privilege to hear from someone today who is not simply an insider, but its leader. So my dear students and participants, you should definitely take full advantage and ask lots of questions. And one final note, Director Tang is also one of the he was, very instrumental in the founding of CIL. So it's an additional pleasure to have him in the second annual session of the CIL eAcademy. I won't take up more of this valuable time. Please, Director Tang, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Aurel, and thank you so much, Patricia, for inviting me. Zhifeng, thanks for your very kind introduction. It is such a pleasure to be back at the Center for International Law. I remember when I was at the Attorney General's Chambers between 1999 and 2012, I was one of the lawyers involved at the time in looking at how can we support and promote public international law in Singapore. And I was involved in a small team of people, right, to set up the Center for International Law. I remember writing the paper, wondering how it would pan out, as we put it together. And I'm so proud that it's grown to such a size and such extent. And so please, I'm here today not just as the DG of Wipo, but as a fellow CIL supporter and lover. And it's such a pleasure to be back with you all today. So I think Zhifeng has given some introduction of my background. I'm a lawyer, like I suspect most of you are on this call. And like many of you, I fell in love with international law when I was in law school. And I did not like corporate law very much. I did not enjoy law of contracts and any of that, but I really fell in love with public international law. So when I joined the Attorney General's Chambers, I spent my first 2 years as a deputy public prosecutor. And then I had my dream job, which was to work with some of the most interesting experts and personalities, Bob Beckman and of course Tommy Koh and Chow Tin and all of them, Chan Sik Kyong in various cases. So that's my personal history as a lawyer. I joined the IP office of Singapore in 2012, and I've been at Wipo for the last 1 year, coming to 1 year now. I took over as the Director General on 1st of October. And maybe I should start by sharing with you what Wipo does, because I think even though it's one of the 15 UN specialized agencies, not many people know about its work. And if I can share with you, it's one of the 15 specialized agencies of the UN. We're based in Geneva. Of course, there are other specialized agencies based in other parts, Vienna and Rome, but most of them are based in Geneva. So we are one of the 15 agencies based in Geneva. We have about 1,500 people in this organization. And one thing that's very unique about Wipo is that unlike many other UN agencies, we provide services. And that allows us to be practically financially autonomous. 95% of our revenue, which is about 400 million Swiss francs a year, comes from our services that we provide to member states. What are these services? We essentially run these international registries that allow for patents and trademarks and designs and other types of IP to cross borders. So that's something that's very unique about what Wipo does, and that's not many other UN agencies have that. Of course, the other part of the work that we do that's very familiar to many of you as students of international law or as practitioners yourself or academics is that we do norm setting work. We set standards, we set norms, and we also do a lot of development assistance. We help member states use IP to grow and develop. And one thing that I'm very, very pleased is that ever since I joined Wipo, I really want to bring the Southeast Asia, the Asian experience of IP, that we've used it as an engine of growth in our economies and bring that to the rest of the world. So that I want to get away from this notion that IP is only for the global north, it's not for the global south. That's not true. IP can be a very powerful tool for jobs, for investments, for economic growth, for business growth all over the world. And just 2 days ago, Wipo launched the Global Innovation Index, and I'm very proud that some of the consistently top performing countries are all from our part of the world, from Vietnam, Philippines, Indonesia, Malaysia, of course, Singapore. All these are countries that are doing well. So I just want to start by sharing with all of you, because many of you are from this part of the world, from ASEAN. I see many fellow ASEAN lawyers. So I want to say that please see Wipo as part of your future as well, as fellow ASEAN brothers and sisters. Wipo's history, it goes back to the late 1800s, like many of the, not many, but quite a number of the international organizations. It started because in the late 1800s, there was an increasing recognition by European countries that IP wasn't well protected across borders. There was no harmonization of IP laws. So you could be an inventor in France, but your inventions wouldn't be recognized in neighboring countries or across the pond in the United States. So there was a movement in the late 1800s by inventors and by authors and composers to fix this problem. And that created the Paris and Berne Conventions in the late 1800s, 1883 and 1886. And that was the first attempt to harmonize IP laws across and to push for reciprocal and recognition of IP rights across borders. So do you see already in the late 1800s, as the world became globalized, within the context of that period of colonization, even within that context, there were attempts by the member states to try to harmonize and to bring these together. The predecessor to Wipo, called BIRPI, it probably sounds better in French than English, but it's called BIRPI, or BIRPI. It was established in 1893. So technically speaking, Wipo has had a 120-year history. But Wipo itself, this organization that are now taken care of, was established in 1970. And so Wipo is about 51 years old, with the roots going back to the late 1800s. And I think when I look at the course syllabus, and I looked at, and I think we sent you a couple of readings ahead of time, a couple of them. There's been much ink spilled over the emergence, proliferation, and at times what some commentators have said, the outsized roles of international organizations, whether in international rulemaking or about accountability. And there are big debates that rage, and I remember reading them when I was in law school and in practice, between the institutionalists who claim that international organizations are great and hold great potential for promoting international cooperation, and the realists who say that no, that's not the case, because really it's the states who run the show, and the states and the rules they establish will reflect state calculations of self-interest. And I think I just want to be, and it probably comes as no surprise that the reality is far more complex than that. A lot of ink has been spilled, but it's really not so cut and dry. It's not an either-or situation, but a combination of both. And if I think as some of you as practitioners would have seen that in practice already, but I can tell you as the head of an international organization that yes, we are constrained very much by the rules established by member states, and also we have to take into account the geopolitics between the member states. That's part of life here. But international organizations have also become actors in our own right, with growing authority, scope, and ability to shape policies and establish rules outside the traditional normative role of states. So I think it's fair to say that international organizations have become an actor in the international stage alongside member states, even if the relationship in the member states are complex and nuanced. But that to me is very clear. And I want to share with you three observations that would sort of bring this home, in a very practical kind of way. And the first is I want to share with you my thoughts about what are international organizations made of, and my second part is what we do, and the third part is how we go about doing what we do, or how do we go about doing our work. And so the first one is, our international organizations, and what are we made of? Are we simply the sum of our parts, which is member states, or are we more than that? And for centuries, the traditional actors in international law have been member states, but they have also looked for international forums where they could express and translate cooperation and action in such areas such as human rights. And in Wipo's case, in the late 1800s, was to harmonize IP rights. And of course, while not flawless, but often with structural constraints, international organizations were to be the forum for the translation of these ideals and to provide the administrative support for the work of international statecraft. Professor Ruji, in his article, says that the core of multilateralism, and I'm going to quote him, is an institutional form which coordinates relations amongst three or more states on the basis of generalized principles of conduct. And as he has said, and quoting again from him, they had but limited membership, determined by power, function, or both, and they were assigned specific and highly circumscribed tasks. In other words, international organizations had very, very clear mandates and very clear boundaries in which they could operate in. And so I think from this view, it seems more towards the sense that IOs are the mere sum of the parts. And if you look at Wipo's structure, there are signs of this. Wipo has a very complex governance structure, and sometimes we even need to clarify these to the member states themselves. Each time the new diplomats come on board, we have to explain to them. We've got 22 assemblies in other bodies of 193 member states. We have unions that discuss certain specific topics that arose because of certain treaties. They meet each year, sometimes more than once a year, in joint sessions as the assemblies of the member states of Wipo, and of course in individual extraordinary sessions. Each assembly is subject to their own rules of procedure, and then beyond that, we've got standing committees that meet, working groups, other expert bodies that meet, and they are governed by their own rules of procedure as well. And so I think from that perspective, you may think that it's really, from the institutional point of view, a lot of constraints. But I don't think that's the case. And even Professor Raji notes that it's not simply a situation where past multilateral arrangements are, as he says, hanging on for dear life. And I couldn't agree with him more that when he says that much of the institutional inventiveness within multilateral arrangements today is coming from the institutions themselves. And I think that's really what I've been saying here. And let me share with you some examples. At Wipo, we have been able to, even though we can't put together, we have not been able to move big treaties in the last 5 to 10 years. But even then, right, Wipo managed to conclude three new treaties in the last 10 years, and 2 of them just entered into force in 2020. And accessions to Wipo treaties have continued at a very fast pace, with 2019 reaching a record high for this decade. And even during the height of the pandemic in 2020, accessions to our treaties continued to be unabated. So I think that this shows that there is a certain inventiveness in the way that international organizations are able to shape the agenda and to attract member states to be part of the agenda, right, beyond just the pure institutional structures. The second thing I want to share with you is that what do international organizations do? And of course, I've really shared with you my view is that IOs are more than just the sum of their parts. And I do think that IOs have come to share the agenda setting and convening power of states even. So take, for example, this COVID-19 crisis. Earlier this year in June, I sat down with Director General Ngozi of the WTO and DG Tedros of the World Health Organization, and we decided that we need to do something. 3 organizations coming together on a trilateral basis, WTO, WIPO, and WHO, to provide intensified trilateral cooperation and give member states a package of support to allow them to overcome the pandemic, because the pandemic is complex. The solution to the pandemic is not just involves innovation and IP, it involves healthcare systems, it involves trade regulation. So why don't we come together as 3 agencies to sit down and work it out and sort it out together? and think that's the way in which we do these things, right? That go beyond just simply being the sum of member states. It wasn't member states that directed us to do this. It wasn't that there were resolutions passed in the WTO and WHO and Wipo to direct the DGs to do this. We decided to come together because we wanted to make sure that we could bring our resources and networks and expertise together to help address the greatest global challenge that we face right now. And it's really important for us to do that. And I think what this has done also is I think this has allowed a certain democratization of international lawmaking, because we see within Wipo, right, more and more participation of NGOs, civil society, non-state actors, industry, and companies and all that, right, in the elaboration of international rules. So if I give you some examples, private entities increasingly have a chance to participate in these rulemaking activities. For example, ILO as a tripartite structure that's been going on for a long time, the International Labour Organization, the ITU as a sector membership that brings on board companies, and then there are more and more public-private partnerships that are being explored within international organizations. For example, the Global Fund that was originally hosted and administered by the World Health Organization has now become an autonomous organization. Agencies like Gavi and CEPI, which are involved in vaccines and helping member states acquire vaccines, and are all public-private partnerships of some sort. So I think this is really interesting because international organizations have acquired, in a way, an ability to act. We don't wait for member states at all times to ask us to act. We within our mandates and within the broad range of our mandates, we try our best to work together to get things done. So I would say that again, the reality is a lot more complex than when, and of course there are debates as to whether IOs and whether IOs should play a role in a direct role in the creation of customary international law. My own personal view, this is not Wipo's view, so my own personal view as an ex-advisor, legal advisor to government, is that for when it comes to very fundamental norms of international law, it still probably has to be member states. I've not seen international organizations, but in the way international organizations act, there may be some impact on it. For example, international organizations are very much bound by rules of natural justice in the way that we deal with our employees within the organization. So that may itself point to certain emergence of certain norms and can be pointed out. So in terms of practice, right, I think there's some impact that we have on these things. How do international organizations go about our day-to-day work? In one of the articles that I recommended for your reading, Professor Kingsbury, famous scholar from NYU, and Professor Cassini referred to what is now known as global administrative law, in which they argue that this may be a new way of looking, a new conceptual framework. Well, it's not so new now, it's about 20 years now. I remember reading it 15, 20 years ago, but it's a new way of looking at how international organizations operate nowadays, and that cannot really be understood within the law of international organizations. We tend to focus on privileges and immunities and these externally oriented things. So first, I want to share with you that there has been, what I see as treaty making becomes tough and becomes difficult, there has been an increase in non-treaty normative instruments, which include the many recommendations, guidelines, best practices, technical advice, conclusions, papers produced by committee results. And I think they may not rise to the level of a norm of a treaty, but they add to the accumulated body of acquis and all of that suggests certain developments in these norms. So I think that's something which I think is an interesting development. And I think Wipo, like many other international organizations, has seen that trend as well. Wipo does administer many treaties. I think we've got 26 treaties that we administer, but we also do a lot of work, right, in terms of technical standards. We've got 54 technical standards, and I think this is the work that happens that is very much behind the scenes, but it has a big impact on our life. Whenever you make an international call, long distance call, remember the ITU, because ITU sets these international codes. When you send a parcel or postcard, or well, I don't know about your generation, you probably don't do that, but if you do send a letter or a parcel or postcard, Oral's laughing because you're both probably from a different generation, but you send it physically, Think about the Universal Postal Union, because they set international postage rates and rules and so on and so forth. Obviously. So I did a quick check, and there are roughly now 2,000 international organizations which act as rule makers and norm setters and service providers. So I think that's an interesting part of international law. And I think that's really something which will be quite fascinating. I can give many other examples. We can do this and talk about this more during the Q&A, but let me give you an example. Wipo's mission for the next 5 years is to reach out much more to the ground and bring IP to the small and medium enterprises. And in order for us to do this, we can't reach out to the millions of SMEs around the world by ourselves. We have to form partnerships. So who are we going to partner with? Well, we'll partner with the IP offices, but increasingly, the IP offices are telling us to partner with chambers of commerce, with business associations, with the SME associations. So it's going to become a public-private partnership where WIPO and the local government, together with private sector, work together to deliver results on the ground. So there's a rise in international organization, public-private initiatives, and I think that's something that is going to become a lot more prevalent. We have other tools and platforms that involve the private sector in a big way. So I think that's going to be quite interesting. This, of course, raises issues about accountability, legitimacy. I think there was a recent case, Supreme Court decision to deal with international organization immunity. It's JAM versus IFC. I think some of you may have studied this, in which the US Supreme Court removed absolute international organization immunity under US law. And I think has potential consequences that are quite interesting. I think the case concerned a claim by fishers and farmers based in Gujarat in India against the International Finance Corporation for the financing of the construction of the coal-fired Tatra Mundra power plant. So let's see what happens there. It's a really, really interesting area of law, interesting part. So I also maybe want to spend a little bit of time, since we're talking about how we work internally, about a large part of my work, which is that I run the organization. And so a large part of my work is not just the externally oriented part of the work, but also the internally oriented part of the work, which is about how do I, what are the internal staff rules and regulations, financial rules and regulations, what are the internal governance structures that you know, how do we deal with labor disputes within WIPO? And one very interesting incident, which I think I'll leave you with, which is that you may or may not have been following about this whole series of pay cut litigation cases and class action cases that's been going on for the last 3 years. And let me share with you this incident. In 2018, the International Civil Service Commission made a recommendation to reduce the post-adjustment multiplier for salaries in the UN common system, of which WIPO is a member. Now, in the UN system, we've got our base salary, and then based on where we are located in the world, where our posting is, that's what we call a post-adjustment multiplier. So if you're in an expensive place like Geneva, that post-adjustment multiplier will be this amount. And then if you have some other place and it all depends on where you are in the world. So it affects your final salary amount, right? So that's the UN system. So the ICSE said, look, we recommend a cut in this for the common system. And what happens is that WIPO had expressed reservations of this, but we decided to implement it anyway, because this was something which the ICSE asked us to do. So we implemented it, leading to a reduction of salaries in staff. This is in 2018. And we faced a class action lawsuit, not just WIPO, but quite a few number of UN agencies in Geneva as well. Now, WIPO is subject to the jurisdiction of the International Labour ILO Administrative Tribunal, and we have a legal obligation to implement the decisions of the ILOAT, the ILO Administrative Tribunal, which is sort of like the final court of adjudication for disputes among staff in WIPO's context. And so staff went to them and said, look, we need to challenge this decision by WIPO. And in July 2019, the ILOAT issued 5 judgments, which held that the ICSE's decision was unlawful. So we reversed our post-adjustment cut. We restored the salaries to our staff, because we are obliged by law to follow what the ILO Administrative Tribunal did. But not all UN agencies are subject to the jurisdiction of the ILOAT. Some other UN agencies are subject to the jurisdiction of the UN Appeals Tribunal. For example, the UN in New York is subject to the jurisdiction of the UN Appeals Tribunal. So there are a different bunch of lawsuits that went to this tribunal, and they decided in March this year in a different way that there was indeed the direct order, and quote the judgment, since there's a direct order of the General Assembly to the SecGen to apply the decision, the UN tribunals do not have authority to review the lawfulness of such a general determination. So you see what happens here. You've got a UN Appeals Tribunal having a very different view from the ILO-80. So these cases highlight a very fascinating feature of internal governance and law around internal governance. You've got two tribunals that decided differently, and we now need to make sense of that and see how we can resolve it. So I will leave this as an indication and go back to what I started this talk, which is that, as you suspected all along, as academics and practitioners and students, the real life in the actual operations of international organizations are far more complex than what can be sometimes reduced to ink and articles. It's frankly speaking also, by the way, as someone who's practiced international law, this is how international law is like. It is an area of law, right, where the intersection between law, policy, and politics is more evident than in any other area of law. And so that's the beauty and that's the frustration of international law. So with that, I will stop my remarks, and I'm happy to take your questions and to hear your views and to engage with you for the rest of the session. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Director Tang, for that absolutely fantastic, very clear overview of the complexities, actually, of UN, Wipo, but in general, international organizations. And you really have touched on many issues, from the democratization, the cooperation, inter-agency cooperation, and many issues. So I think we have a very rich foundation for some good Q&As, and I already see a hand up, so that's great.
Great.
Let's see. Zhifeng, do you want to help us with the hands up and who's first in our list?
Yes, yeah, I see that, Costa. You may want to ask a question.
Costa, please.
Unmute, yeah.
Hi, Costa. We can't hear you, Costa.
Unmute yourself, Costa.
Yeah.
The famous Zoom words.
Okay. Thank you, Director Daren Tang, for your effective leadership at Wipo.
Thank you.
I am one of the beneficiaries of the Wipo distance learning program.
Ah, really? Okay. Costa, where are you from?
I'm from Tanzania.
You're from Tanzania. Tanzania did very well in the Global Innovation Index too, yeah.
Yeah, and I'm also the beneficiary of Wipo summer program, so I'm a huge fan of your work at Wipo.
Great.
And my question goes to the global governance of the manufacturing of vaccine, the COVID vaccine.
Yeah.
Because recently we've been seeing the massive hesitance of the developed nations like United States, China, Germany, France, when it's come to the patent waiver of manufacturing Wipos to the other developing nations. I would like to see the role of Wipo, or the obligation which Wipo can play when it's come to the patent waiver as far as the manufacturing of vaccine is concerned. Because you have stated that recently you sat down with the director of WHO and the WTO. And I know Wipo has been collaborating with WTO as far as the TRIPS agreement is concerned. But when it's come to the patent waiver, it seems like something which is a bit complex because it involves the interest of developing nations. So what is your input? What is your say as far as this problem is concerned?
Yeah, thank you so much, Costa, and I'm very happy to hear that you've been benefiting from Wipo summer school as well as the distance learning. I think first I come from Southeast Asia. I come from Asia. I come from a developing part of the world. You may not think, I remember growing up in Singapore, and it was tough. It's not what it is now. And so I remember the struggles of a developing country in this area. So I really want to bring that precious lessons that we learned. We made a lot of mistakes along the way as a country in building, and finally I think we've done something that we think is useful. But we really want to bring that attitude and that spirit to Wipo. That's my mission. So let me start by sharing with you that for me, as I said in the start, right, IP is for everyone, and I mean it. It cannot be just for developed countries. It has to be for every country. And especially we need to reach out to developing countries and LDCs because they have not seen the power and potential of IP to really transform. And I'm not just talking about, I'm not talking about high-tech industries and advanced manufacturing. I'm talking about even simple things like, can we help entrepreneurs on the ground use IP to take their ideas to the region? So recently, a few months ago, we worked in Uganda. We work with the Ugandan government and an NGO, and typically a UN agency would do a 2-day seminar and then we fly off and that's that. But we've stayed on the ground with these entrepreneurs for the last few months, being on their business journey. And out of the 20 female entrepreneurs, 12 are still with us, and they're learning how to use IP to incorporate into their business. And it's not about patents; it's about simple things like their brands and their designs, their trademarks, and all that. Can we use them to? Can they use these things to franchise their F&B concepts into the region? So these are the very down-to-earth things that we're doing that we want to bring to the world. Now on the vaccines, right? Let me be very clear. I've said it to the WTO. I've said it to in many different forums that Wipo supports vaccine equity. Really, no one. It's first of all, it's morally. That's the moral thing to do. That's what we are here to do as a UN agency. And secondly, right? From a practical point of view, no one is safe until everyone is safe. New variants will emerge in other parts of the world, and because the world is so interconnected, if you don't solve it if you don't address it in every part of the world, no one in the world is safe. So we need to do this. But what Wipo wants to do is that we want to work constructively with other UN agencies like WTO and WHO, because the vaccine, what I think the world needs is we need to ramp up vaccine manufacturing capability. Right now, there are too few places in the world that can manufacture vaccines. We need 3 or 4 places on every continent that can manufacture this vaccine. But to manufacture vaccines is very complex. You need to have all the logistics and administration around it. You need the tech transfer, you need the innovation, but you also need to have good healthcare systems, logistics. You need to have the trade regulations set right, because vaccines have different components, and if the trade regulations are hindering the movement of these components, then you can have that manufacturing facility there, but you cannot produce it to that level. See, so why I sat down with DG Tedros and DG Ngozi was that we really wanted to bring all of that together, right, so that we can support member states too. And I'm very pleased that the first workshop, technical workshop on tech transfer, will be this coming Monday. So we'll be opening up a first workshop. Unfortunately, it's only open to member states because we are targeting at the level of member state experts. But this is the kind of work that Wipo needs to do, and we'll continue doing. Wipo itself has launched our own package of COVID-19 support. I won't take up too much time because there are many other questions, but I will pass to Oral the package of services they're providing in member states, tech transfer, IP licensing, all these things that we want to help member states with, because it's not just about overcoming this pandemic, but we want member states to use IP to grow and develop their own economies. And I think this is an opportunity to really bring that expertise that we have, right, and to help member states use IP as a friend, as a tool for development as well. So I look forward to working with your country, with Tanzania, and many others, right, to make this happen. But it's going to be a challenge. But let's make it happen. Let's try our best to overcome this.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. And I think your statement is a powerful one. IP is for everyone, and breaking that stereotype that it's really for the rich countries. So I'm to be quite honest, I didn't realize that as well. So I'm learning. Zifeng, who's next on our list? We have lots of questions.
Yes, next we have Rumana from Bangladesh.
Hi, Rumana.
Hello, this is my pleasure. I'm very much feeling glad to talk to you because last 10 years I'm following Wipo every day because
Oh, really? Okay.
yes,
I didn't know we're so interesting.
yes, because there are a lot of courses you are going and I taught 3 or 4 courses which I got certificate, and last time I got certificate from summer school.
Congratulations.
Thank you very much. I also followed your Wipo website every day because you do a lot of legislative works. I am a legislative person from Bangladesh and now I am in my ministry, law ministry. But it is my question. Always I feel that that question. My country in Bangladesh, we are drafting many IP acts, IP laws. Already we drafted a lot of Copyright Act. We drafted Patent Act, and we are going to draft Industrial Design Act. But when we do these works, and when I follow the Wipo website, then many questions arise in my mind. The special question as a legislative draftsman, how Wipo adapt laws, especially universal system of lexicon or universal system of legislative works, especially patent cooperation treaty and others. We know about UN General Assembly system, but I do not know Wipo system. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Rumana. Well, if I can, we have for the last at least 20-25 years been assisting every member state that needs assistance with legislative drafting. And by the way, when I was working in the Attorney General's chambers, we always had a lot of respect for the legislative draftsman because it's not easy to draft legislation. It's a very specialized area of law. We tried to outsource it. It was really difficult. So in the end, we know it's really tough. So all I can say is that we are ready to support Bangladesh in drafting of this legislation. It's not a one size fits all. So I think one thing that everyone has to remember about IP is that IP is a tool, and the tool needs to be tailor-made to what your country needs and wants at your level of development. If you take a tool that is that's not appropriate for what you want to do, your aspirations, then it will not achieve the results that you want. So Wipo's approach to IP is that, and we believe in a balanced and effective IP system. You know, we believe in balance because balance brings in this notion that it has a fit where you want to go as a country. It has to fit your industrial policy, your economic policy, your social policy. So we were first, when we do legislative draft, and we help member states to do legislative drafting, we first try to understand where the member state wants to go to in terms of this economic development, social development, cultural development. And then from there, we can advise on the policy, and then we advise on the legislation. So we look forward to supporting your office in this. I know your ambassador very well here because he was the former ambassador of Bangladesh to Singapore, Ambassador Rahman. So a pleasure to meet someone from Bangladesh.
Thank you very much. Someday I shall also meet you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Rumana, for that important question. Daren.
Yeah, thank you. So next we have Mara Angeli from the Philippines.
Hi, Director Tang. First of all, we also want to thank you in the Philippines, your partnership. The Wipo Academy with the Intellectual Property Office has provided a lot of certification, and they have even innovated the practice where people have to be certified and as a part of a recommendatory practitioner. So now my question is regarding the role of the Wipo and in how they could possibly issue policy papers for guidance in practice with the MNCs. Because what I encounter usually in the practice is when we're having takedown notices, when we're dealing, for example, with platforms like YouTube or even on Amazon, because you have a lot of sellers trying to enforce rights, or if there are creators that have inadvertently used, or maybe some of their content is used by another. For example, an original content, then it's used by another with someone who's going to react on it.
Yeah.
And unfortunately,
reaction videos, yeah.
Yeah, so our concerns may be, I'm sorry, I'm not so familiar, but maybe we could have, because in the data privacy, the GDPR, usually have like case-to-case position papers on how to guide also across different jurisdictions a specific problem, maybe a question and answer to bring it down to the consumer level. Yes, sir.
Thanks so much, Mara. Mara Angeli, right? Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Well, are you from Wipo field? Or you?
No, sir. A supporter. The director of Wipo field is one of our batchmates. That's why we always enlist in the.
Okay. So Roel is DG Roel is a batchmate of it's a small world. It's a small world. Yeah. Well, here's an interesting topic that touches on governance and touches on Wipo's mandate. In general, I'm not sure about other UN agencies. I suspect it's the case for most other UN agencies. Member states are not they are not comfortable when the Secretariat issues policy statements and takes positions on policy statements in general. So what we do is that we try not to tell member states this is what you must do. So we try not to be prescriptive, but what we try to do is that we try to if we write white papers, we try to talk about the state of we try and talk about the developments. We try to talk about the factors, the different considerations, the issues, and we try not to be prescriptive and say that you must do this or you must do that. But what we do is that we sit down with member states in private, and then we try again, just with, as Rumana talked about, legislative drafting, we try to understand what their policy concerns are, and then we advise them on how to meet their relevant policy concerns. So I think this is one area where in general, I think member states are reluctant to let the Secretariat prescribe one preferred or one single model of policy choice. So you find that most of the secretaries and most of the international agencies will tend to focus more on bringing people together to talk. So for example, let's talk about AI. What is Wipo's view on whether IP officers should allow for the registration of AI-related, AI-invented patents? Yes. We don't get involved in that because member states don't want the Secretariat to prescribe a policy position on that. But what we do is that we don't do nothing. We bring people together to talk about these things. So later this afternoon, I'm opening up a Wipo and AI conversation. Wipo's IP and AI conversation. You can join if you want. It's later this afternoon. And what we do is that we bring people from all the different stakeholders, from the NGOs to the industry to different member states who've got different views, and then we bring them together. We convene them, and because Wipo is global, it's neutral, it's credible, people feel safe expressing their views, and that allows us to contribute to the world. So I think this is where, if Philippines needs help in terms of how it would like, as within Philippines, to address some of these issues, we're happy to help the Philippines as in our job as supporting the policy development in the country. But in general, we don't make big pronouncements on this issue to say this and that. So most member states are very, very reluctant for the Secretariat to get into that.
Thank you for the clarification, sir.
Yeah, most welcome.
Yeah, thank you. And you raised AI. And last week we had, of course, very well, Professor Simon Chesterman.
Oh, yes. Okay.
Yeah, and he spoke about AI and peace and security, actually. So now this afternoon, I'm sure we'll have some students very interested in following that.
Yeah.
Yes, we have more questions. Who's next, Yifeng?
Yeah, so next we have Anaga from India.
Anaga, please.
Yes, ma'am. Hi, sir. I'm Anaga from India, and I've been a part of TISC inaugural in India in 2019. So my question is a little deviant from the topic. I wanted to know what steps that Wipo intend to take in geographical indication, like in preservation, conservation, and commercialization, because mostly the developing countries don't have wines and spirits in their GI, but they have many other artisans and handicrafts. Since I'm also researching on the same, I would love to hear your views on the same.
Yeah, well, GIs is more than just wines and spirits. I totally agree with you. And coming from Asia, where we're very proud of our food heritage. Well, coming from Singapore, where we are food obsessed, but we have no GIs, by the way. But we come from cultures with a lot of GIs: China, India, Malaysia, and Indonesia. It's not just about wines and spirits. Now, for me, GIs is very unique because it's one of the few IPs where it's not revolving around where it revolves around heritage, because a lot of these GIs are, and maybe for the benefit of the other people in the class, GIs or geographical indications are appellations of origin. They are unique food or whatever handicraft products that come from a certain part of the world. So think about champagne. It comes from the Champagne region in France. Think about Gula Melaka coming from Malacca. Think about the Darjeeling tea that has to come from the Darjeeling region in India, and there are many other examples as well. For me, it's really fascinating, and I think it's very useful because it's a form of IP that supports communities. Because often the GIs are not owned by a single person or by a corporation, but they're owned by a traditional community that's been doing that work that way for a long time. And so one of the missions of Wipo is to bring IP to the ground, and often GIs are a very important part of that. Let me share you one story. I don't know if anyone from Cambodia is here, but if anyone from Cambodia is here, we may heard of Kampot pepper from Cambodia. Kampot pepper it's been grown for 700 years in Cambodia. It's a very special pepper with a very special fragrance. And I think some years back, some chefs in high-end restaurants discovered it, started using it, and then we worked with the Cambodian government to register it as a GI. And it's not just about registering it as a GI, because that's just protection. What needs to happen after that? And you, Anaga, you mentioned commercialization. We need to combine that GI with the right marketing and branding and packaging so that it can be sold at a price that it deserves, right? You think about champagne. Why is champagne so expensive? It's because it's been part of the reason is, oh yeah, it's a good product, but it's also because there's been centuries of marketing and branding put into that product by the champagne community. So it's not just about GIs, but it's about the trademarks and the designs and all of that coming together. And what we have done is that we have managed to, we're very pleased that the Kampot pepper community in Cambodia, the revenues have increased from, or the exports have increased from 60,000 worth of exports per year to 1 million. And the village headman told us that, instead of bicycles, they now go around in motorcycles, and they've transformed their standard of living. See? Here's an example where IP can help communities. And here's an example where we want to pay attention to this, because these are the traditionally underserved communities that the IP system is not touched on. So we want to also reach out to these people. So thank you for asking this question.
Thank you, sir. I would also request you to have a round conference or a convention, especially on GI, because I feel it's a most...
You missed it. We had one last week. You missed it. We had one last week.
Oh,
we had a virtual GI symposium last week. So, but I'll ask my team to get in touch so that they can send you the link to I think there's a recording, and there's a virtual GI exhibition in Wipo going on right now. I'll send the link to you so you can see. We have a listing of 100 over GIs from around the world. You can see on your mobile phone.
Thank you so much, sir, because I'm researching on many GIs which are losing out in India. So I would love to hear more about it. So good. Yes, thank you, sir.
Wow. Yeah. Wonderful. Wow, that's fascinating. And I have to say, I'm really impressed at what we don't see the behind the scenes work of Wipo. It's not just the big meetings and gatherings. Yeah. So
actually that's the nuts and bolts oral of our work. The nuts and bolts of the big meetings are the ones that people are interested in, well, in a way, because of the congregation of diplomats and ministers and all of that. But the nuts and bolts of international organizations where real work gets done to deliver real results on the ground. It's where a lot of work is behind the scenes. And I mentioned ITU and UPU and all of that, right? So that's the fascinating part about the work that we do. Doesn't get studied enough.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think it's really coming out through these questions. All right, Zifeng?
Yeah, next we have Shehzadi from Pakistan.
Hello.
By the way, Pakistan has some of the best mangoes in the world, and I've told the ambassador, please register them as GIs.
Yeah, thank you, sir. Thank you. It's a matter of great pleasure to attend this session. I saw your picture with the ambassador while signing the Madrid system with Pakistan this year, but I couldn't.
Ambassador Hashmi, yes, yeah.
I would be attending your session this way. It was a matter of like great pleasure for me. And my question is regarding the summer school internship, because as being the youth of Pakistan, I have seen a very great potential in the university students and law students particularly. But we have been not offered such course. I mean, I was searching through these courses, but they were more of different countries, and that's kind of, can this privilege be awarded to us, I mean, to Pakistan, or is there any planned for future year as well? I just wanted to ask because as being a student, I really wanted to actually attend that and be a part of that esteemed organization as well.
We are intending to scale up our Wipo Academy offerings to as many countries in the world. It will take time, but already last year we trained 150,000 people. So I was very pleased to see some of your classmates and participants already benefiting from it. But I think we can do more. It helps that people are more used to virtual classrooms now. So it probably will be hybrid. In the past, whenever we had some challenges in scaling, because people tended to see these summer schools as physical. But now because of hybrid, and I think many of you are noticeably younger than me, so I think you'll be more used than me even with this, right? So I think with this we can scale even more, and certainly I think Pakistan's a country of I think 250 million people now, about that size. We really want to bring the IP story into your country as well. And like I said, I'm here to bring IP to every part of the world. So yes, we do intend. So I'll tell Ambassador Hashmi that I met a very passionate young colleague, and that we need to work with him to bring a Wipo Academy into Pakistan as well.
Can I add something with?
Yes, thank you, Shehzadi. And you see, you have a very strong following. Wipo has a very strong following in our.
I'm surprised. I thought I'd be, yeah. I'm very pleasantly surprised.
Yeah, I didn't realize it either. So I'm very happy to see that. All right. Well, we only have a few minutes left. We have 2 questions left, I see. Do you have enough time for us, Director Tang, for another 2 questions?
Yes, of course. As an alumni of CIL, I will have time for.
Great.
I'll make time for, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, next we have Sheila from Cameroon.
Yeah. Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, Sheila, we can hear you.
Okay, great. Thank you so much, Mr. Director General. I'm Sheila. I work with the Ministry of External Relations in Cameroon, and I'm also a researcher in the area of ocean governance. And coming from the developing country, and I've always been a little bit curious with the ongoing development of the international law of the sea, with deep sea bed mining, and the different discoveries that are ongoing, and the different contracts that the International Seabed Authority is awarding. Knowing that, because I see some of the things are being too utopic, so trying to put realities in the facts of what is happening and what is going to happen while building a kind of scenario, I wonder how intellectual property will play a major role in all of that. So I'm curious to find out what is Wipo doing right now in this particular domain. How are you planning to collaborate in order to kind of build a, should I say, a reassuring atmosphere for countries like Cameroon, countries like other developing states all over the world, knowing that whether we like it or not, some of the deep sea bear mining activities will go commercial. Even though right now the different international convention or different international efforts that are carried out are saying that it's going to be a shared benefit and shared access kind of approach that are going to be implemented.
Yeah.
So
Thank
what's
you,
the
Sheila.
position of WIPO?
Yeah. Well, Sheila, you know, I'll be very frank with you, even though this is being recorded. WIPO has in the past been seen itself as a technical agency, and therefore WIPO has not really been involved that actively in these sort of cross-agency collaborations. So I think having ever since I came on board, I felt that WIPO needs to engage with in these areas.
Yes.
I must admit that ocean baits, I know this area because when I was practicing as an international lawyer, a big area of work for Singapore was UNCLOS, you know, Tommy Coe and UNCLOS 82 and all of that. So, and I was involved in the Pedra Branca case which involved a maritime aspect to it as well. But I don't think WIPO had a direct connection and link to this particular topic yet. But let me share with you some reactions that might be interesting. I think first, I think what WIPO tries to do is that we try to lend our expertise and our knowledge of our IP, and that's what we hope to be able to do to other international organizations, other bodies. So insofar as they ask us for help, we will give them advice. We will share with them what we know, because they are sister agencies and we are international bodies, so we can give them neutral advice, right, that can allow them to have an objective view of the IP aspects of it. So I think that's what we do. Secondly, right, we have some interesting platforms that might be interesting, not in this area specifically, but we have this platform called Wipo Green, which is a technology matching platform for climate change related technologies. What we do is that we take green tech and climate change related technologies from all over the world. We put it onto this platform, and then we matchmake it with any part of the world that needs to use this technology. I can imagine, Sheila, if there is technology related to ocean baits that are, you know, that are relating to extraction, and then of course environmental effects and all of that, that such platforms may be useful. But these platforms are not easy to run. And again, what I'm trying to do is to review how to scale up these platforms. There's a demand for it, and they have to be global, because the technology can come from anywhere and can be deployed anywhere. So it makes no sense for this tech matching platforms to be just within one country. But they're not easy to run because they involve a lot of, you know, you need to run the IT systems, and you need to make sure that you have a team that does it well, and so on and so forth. So it becomes a proper tech matching platform. So that's another area where it might be interesting as well. And if there's any suggestions you have as to how WIPO can be involved, I'm very happy to hear your views, because I have to say that I've not followed this issue, and I don't think my colleagues have, but we'd be happy to help in any way. And of course, if Cameroon needs help on any innovation aspect of it, we stand ready to support your government, right, to understand the issues, to help your government, your policymakers to craft the right policy responses to all the different issues surrounding it.
Okay, thank you. Will it be possible to also have your address, your email address?
Yeah, of course, it's available. I'll type it in so you can.
Yeah, thank you, Sheila. I'm as a law of the sea person myself.
Yeah.
I appreciate your question. And I'm just going to add, this is a big issue right now going on with the BBNJ marine genetic resource issue and the IP issues there, but we can't get into that. We don't have time.
Yeah, well, you know,
I think
the chief executive, my successor at the IP office, Rena, she's chairing this. So you could ask her.
Exactly.
Yeah. She wouldn't know. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, that's right. So, all right. So we won't take time on that, but it's a great issue. I think we have one more question left before we wrap up. Jipeng?
Yeah, thank you. The last is Gail Anthony from the Philippines.
Hello, DG. It's an honor. I was actually a graduate of the Wipo Philippines Summer School, which was conducted last
Fantastic,
month.
yeah.
Yeah, it was an amazing program, and also engaged with the Philippine Department of Education. So I'm aware that in 2019, WIPO and the Department of Education had a memorandum of agreement to improve IP education in the schools and to encourage innovation among our students. So there's a lot of good work being done in the Philippines from WIPO. But my question is not related to intellectual property, but a general one. I would just like to hear your thoughts about technology and multilateralism, because Asia is interesting, because if you look at the the GII, the Innovation Index, you have a lot of Asian countries in the top of the list, and some like Southeast Asian countries maybe a bit far behind. But Singapore, there's a lot of gap.
Philippines is one of the top performers, huh? Yeah. So
that's
congratulations. Yeah, we call them the TVIPs. Yeah.
Yeah, that's good to hear. I'm just thinking about technology and innovation and how it relates to power in international relations, especially now that we have AI, we have drones, cyber war. Do you think that right now and moving forward, innovation and technology would actually translate to stocks in terms of power in international relations, which would leave developing countries further behind? And in this case, if it's a problem, that how do you think we could address this? Seeing that you're from an international organization and leading one, I'd just like to hear your thoughts about this. Thank you.
Well, Gio, thank you for your question, and I'm again glad to meet the Wipo Academy alumni, or Wipo Summer School alumni. It's such a pleasure. I didn't know we had so many. I need to talk to the Wipo Academy team and congratulate them. Gio, in international relations, and I'm going to put on my hat as an international lawyer, and not as the DG of Wipo for a while. But you know that in international relations, every member state will make use of every single available resource and tool to advance its national interests. It's as simple as that. So clearly, of course, innovation, technology, AI will be part of those tools that member states will use. And you see that happening in the world. You see that as part of the conversation with very big countries, and then the disputes all center around technology and innovation. And therefore, this is increasingly an area of interest to policymakers, to politicians, to top leadership, and to industry, and all of that. My view is that this is how the world is like. But what international agencies need to do, right, is that we need to do first, bring people together to talk. Our job is to uphold the multilateral system. And that would not be upheld, right, if we let people be in their own corners and perpetuate their own perspective of things. And that's why it's so important that international agencies make an effort to convene meetings. So you might think that these meetings are, people say talk shop and all of that, but they do make a difference. When you sit down with someone from another part of the world that you're competing, or you're in a state of cooperation, that means competition plus cooperation, it makes a difference when you sit down and talk and you understand each other's perspective. You may not agree, but at least there's a chance for you to sit down and talk. And that's why these meetings are so crucial in helping that to happen. So and that's the reason why it's a key part of any international organization. So first thing, to get people to come and sit down and talk, because that reduces the tensions, that allows people to understand each other a bit better, builds the relationships. And international relations is also personal relations, by the way. One thing coming from Singapore, and I don't know how many Singaporeans are on this call, but one thing in Singapore is that we tend to assume that the rational intellectual argument will win the day. Well, it's not that straightforward. Relationships are important. You have to build relationships. You have to make an effort to reach out and connect. And of course, that rational intellectual reason must be there, but it's within the larger environment of your dynamics of relationships that you've built up with the people that you can, So I think that's one thing that's important. Second thing is that for me as an international organization, and for all international organizations, we want there to be, even development throughout the world. And so why is Wipo making such a big effort to reach out to small, medium enterprises, to communities that have heritage, to artists and musicians? There's one project that I'm doing that I think some of you might find interesting. We have this project called Wipo for Creators, where we're working with an NGO called Music Rights Awareness Foundation. One of the members whom is Bjorn from ABBA. So for those of you whose parents are big ABBA fans, or I'm a big ABBA fan myself, we're working with them to create a platform where musicians talk to fellow musicians about IP. So why is Wipo doing all these things that are quite unusual and quite different from what? Well, because I really want there to be a more even development of IP, because I really believe that IP can be a tool for everyone, see. So of course we cannot stop countries from competing as an international organization. It goes back to the governance part, right? Are we the sum of the parts, or we can't stop countries from competing, and so we're subject to that. But we can help to mitigate, and we can help to bring people together, overcome some of the sharp divisions and the divides, right? By playing our role to bring things to the ground and really helping people to understand and use all these tools that we have, right, expertise that we have, so that there is less of that chance of multilateralism being undermined more and more by tensions and by divisions.
I see we have one hand raised. I know we're taking so much of your time.
Yeah, I've got time for one more question and that's it. So after that,
okay, one more, and that's absolutely it. Not too long a question, because obviously Director Tang is sharing quite a bit of his valuable time with us. Thanks.
Hello, I'm sorry for my late hand raise.
No problem.
And I really thank you for giving me the floor, and really a big thank you to Wipo Academy for I've participated in general course on intellectual property, and that was very nice. Last year I participated, but my big concern about some international organization that giving the services to the people all around the world, like Wipo, WTO. My big concern is how the Wipo mechanism is to giving the knowledge to the people that they don't know what is intellectual property, maybe in very far villages, or in some maybe someone has for example has a trademark or a patent in but living in a jungle, doesn't have any reach to the internet, or the government doesn't help them. What is Wipo mechanism for that? Thank you so much.
Yeah, Muhammad Riza, where are you from? Sorry.
I'm from Iran.
You're from Iran, okay, yeah.
Unfortunately, my country is not familiar with intellectual property, and I'm really
Iran
sorry.
has done very well in the GII this year, by the way. So I wouldn't discount Iranian innovation and creative prowess. You know, I think Iran has done very well. I welcome you to beat the GII and then see for yourself how well Iran is doing. I think there are several ways in which we want to tackle this. First, we need to talk about IP in a way that's non-technical. And I keep telling my colleagues, you know, yes, talk to IP, to your fellow specialists in a way that fellow IP experts understand, but you need to be bilingual. You need to then be able to talk about IP in a language that other people can understand. If you go down to the business community, you need to talk about it in a way that they understand. If you talk to the communities, you need to talk about it in a very down-to-earth way that they need to understand. So we need to change the way we talk about IP. Right now, one African ambassador told me that the problem with intellectual property is that it's too intellectual, and we all had a good laugh about it, but it's an indication of how most laypersons think about IP. Very technical, very mysterious, and therefore I don't want to have anything to do about it. So first thing is that if you look at Wipo's strategy for the next 5 years, there's one whole pillar we talk about communicating and engaging about IP in a very different kind of way. So I think it starts with that. Secondly, we need to talk about IP in a way that, in the language that they understand. So I'm going to reach out to these people in the remote villages. It cannot be in English or in French or in Spanish. It has to be in the language that they understand, Farsi or whatever. So we're making an effort to use technology to, and here's where technology can be for good. We're using technology to try to be able to translate languages into many different languages, beyond the 6 UN languages, into the languages that on the ground people can understand. And I think that's very important. And the third thing we need to do is we need partners. Wipo cannot go by ourselves into the ground, into these villages. We need to work with your governments and with your stakeholders in your country, right? NGOs and civil society and and not just the IP office, but also your maybe your ministries of commerce and industry, your ministries of the SMEs, or your ministries for the, so WIPO has to now broaden its partnerships. And that's why I mentioned in my opening remarks that partnership part has become more important. And so with this, we hope that over time we can begin to reach out more and more. And then we need to, after that, we need to close the loop by telling stories about how we've been able to help people, because the person in the mountain, hopefully, they I don't know about the mountain, but the remote persons, right, if through TV or radio, or maybe even through, they can hear that, look, this is helpful, and they can have some help for them, right? I think that will begin to change things a little bit. But you see, WIPO has never done much of this. So this is really about, so we really need government help to do this. We can't enter into a country by ourselves. We need support from the ground. But we're committed to seeing how we can bring IP to really to everyone, everywhere.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you so much. I have to say that, first of all, this brings us to the end. And what an absolutely fantastic lecture this has been with you.
Yeah.
And personally, I have to say I was one of those people that, okay, IP, very technical, and being a non-technical person, but I'm so impressed by your vision of IP for all. And just as you're, in response to this question of bringing it to everyone, democratizing it so that it's not just for a certain elite group.
Yeah.
I have to say that I am now a WIPO fan. And I'm delighted that we have so many alumni from the WIPO and Academy. I had no idea. So a big fan. Thank you so much. This has been really a very eye-opening, so insightful. And I want to have Patricia, my dear colleague, say a few words as well as we close this session.
Thank you so much, Nilofer. I won't delay you anymore. I'm just going to join Nilofer in saying that I've learned so much from this talk. And Director General Daren Tang, you were really great also in taking up all the questions from our participants. And I'm also very grateful for the great questions that we had. I think we're all becoming WIPO fans and we'll be certainly following your work. And I think this is a very important issue, and anything we can do also to help it disseminating it. I think it's also an issue of understanding it and disseminating it. I've worked a lot with patents and trademarks, and I know how technical it is, but it's a great tool for everybody, and especially in a very digitalized world, even more. So I really appreciate your availability and your generosity in terms of time, and thank you so much on behalf of the Academy.
Well, it's a pleasure to be with all of you. I'm so proud to meet so many WIPO alumni and those who have benefited from the courses. It really warms my heart. I know, and I thank you for your very good questions. It's good to be back with the CIL, and I wish all of you your best as you go through the course. It isn't easy. It's all virtual, I think, but it's a very exciting area of work. I never regretted my time as an international lawyer. Spent 12 years of my life doing it. And I wish you all the best as you chart your own course in working in different parts of the global system. And maybe our paths will cross one day. But thank you so much. And I look forward to your interest in WIPO's work. And I look forward to supporting all of your countries as well. Let's make this happen. Thank you again.
Wonderful. Great. Thank you.